Om Shanti. Good morning, Sister Denise. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And welcome to our continuation of this conversation, being relevant, stable, current, and spiritual in uncertain times. As the intention of this is really to get many things clarified and help in our journey. So once again, welcome. So we really are very, very fortunate to have a regular sustenance from Sister Denise.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We're in different parts of the world, so hello everyone. And yesterday we looked at some of the challenges that everyone is facing. And what came through is that we need to really stand up on our own feet. We need to develop maturity. And also we need to look at what has caused many BKs to remain in a, maybe we can say a little bit of a childlike or even possibly childlike state. And as we know, every Murli begins with the word sweet children in English. And in Hindi, mite bache. And bache has two meanings. One is children, and the other is sons. So the soul sometimes has been called male. Otherwise, the soul has no gender. But the reason the soul has been called male is because of the mentality of having rights and also responsibility. Whereas the word child implies rather small, and that you are told what to do by your parents who are adults and you are not an adult, and so you have to do what they say. And this is one of the reasons I think that people have somehow failed to notice that it doesn't look very good to be in adult bodies and yet operating like small children. So we need to take a look at this. Of course, there's all kinds of reasons why it happened, but now I think we have a lot of differences in situation. So we need to take a look at what that's all about. And if you think about it, some of those who you call seniors may be only a few months older than you physically, but in terms of mentality, you may put them up on a pedestal. And one of the things that happens in this kind of situation is that you give away your power. And then you assume that those people will take responsibility. And then when they don't, you get distressed about it. So that means something is needs to be adjusted. Something is not quite right. Another word that we need to look at in all of this is the word infantilization. And in case if you don't know that word, it is to treat a person who is older, adult, as if they are a child. And one of the things that happens in something called institution is that you are in a position which you are not in when you're not in an institution. And so I want to take a look at this word institution and how it is used, generally speaking. So mostly the word institution refers to prison. It's also been said the institution of marriage. And so within a marriage, there is a situation where the head of the family has all the power, and the other people in the family, depending on the way the head of the family deals with the question of power, they may be empowered or they may be completely disempowered. We also are looking at this in a context, and the context of the prevailing social attitudes of the 1930s in India. And that was a time when there was zero emancipation of women. Children did not have any kind of rights. Women and children are actually pieces of property who belong to the people in power, usually the male head of the household, which can sometimes be the grandfather, not just the father, but the grandfather. And so when you have an arrangement like this, then it is very much easy for this phenomenon of infantilization to take place. And then it also is connected with language. So when we use this word children, 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 and baba, 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 well, it creates a good situation of infantilization. And so I think probably people didn't really notice this, or they didn't really think about it particularly. But in the current situation, it has come up. And so we need to think about it and move out of that mentality and into the mentality of a person who is in their power, a person who is adult, a person who is mature, a person who is capable of looking after themselves socially, financially, medically, and all the different ways that are connected with what it means to be an adult, self-actuated, self-responsible person. And if one is not that, then one has to quickly do something about it, because it is really not possible to move forward. One of the things that is a reality in all of this is that people have got into a religious mode. And I make a distinction, I mentioned this yesterday, the distinction between the physical and the spiritual. And the thing about religious is that it tends to want people to be quite childish, because in most of the religions you have a fair amount of blind faith. And so what happens when people come into a spiritual practice, some of them, probably the majority of them, come from a religious background. And it also mentions in the Gyan that you have to finish your bhakti before you can come in Gyan. And so the sort of setup, the circumstances, the language, the references, the analogies, these are all assuming that somebody has a mentality of being religious, that they're used to going to temples. Of course, mostly in the Sakar Murlis, Baba's talking to Hindus. And then when it became the Abhyakt Murlis and the double foreigners started to come, then Baba started to talk in a wider way. And now we have a different situation. And the situation we have, I'll give you an analogy, which is to do with the Jain religion. And the Jain religion was started by a man called Vardhamana. And this was a good couple of thousand years ago. So the Dilvara temple, you know, is a Jain temple. And when Vardhamana left the body, there were a few adherents, a few disciples. And so the people who were living with Vardhamana, they carried on the teachings and developed the spiritual path, but then they also left the body. And then what happened is the remaining Jains said, okay, now we don't have Vardhamana, we don't have the elders. What do we do? Because we can't really remember what the knowledge is. And we don't have people to tell us, because of course this kind of knowledge is always oral, an oral tradition, nothing's written down. So they started thinking about whether it should be written down. And they divided into two groups, one of which were called the Swetambar, and the other of which were called the Digambar. And the Swetambar are called the white-clothed ones. And the Digambar are the ones who are called sky-clad. So they were the naked Jains, because it was very much a religion about giving up everything, and very much to do with non-violence and all of this. So here we have an interesting situation where everything, whatever Baba has said in class, not out of class, in class, is written down. And this is the Sakar and the Avyat Murlis that we have. And we also have some trance messengers. We now have a situation where pretty much the elders are no longer with us, just very few, and who are not really in a position to take a leadership function. And Baba is no longer giving the Avyat Murlis, which means that the entire knowledge, Sakar and Avyat, is there. It's written down word for word. And so what people are doing mostly is listening to it again. And we've been listening to the Sakar Murlis again every day for, 50 years. And the Avyat Murlis since, I think the last one was around 2017, 2018. And so we listened to those again. And for the last few years, it was not deep, deep Gyan. So here we have it. And now we're in a situation where we want to shift to the next level. And people are asking the question, what is next? What is next? But, there's some people who just want to carry on with the same traditions, and that's very nice. But we're not really able to grow and mature by just sort of repeating the spiritual childhood. I think now we need to consider what is going to be my position. Am I going to deal with this in a relatively religious way? And am I going to repeat my childhood and believe all the things and meditate in the same way and all that? Or am I going to think about moving to a higher level of consciousness, think about how does one do this in a way independently of an institutional context? And I mentioned a little bit about institution as the institution of prison, the institution of marriage. Another institution would be an asylum for people who are mentally handicapped. That's also called an institution. And do we really want to be in a situation like that? This is something that you have to do individually, because ultimately your relationship with God, your relationship with yourself, your relationship with other human beings is a personal choice. And so we have to make these choices. And this happens when a person decides, okay, I'm an older person now, and now I have to be fully adult, which means independent, self-actuated, interacting and integrated into the wider world, the wider society. And yet you're not going to just ask somebody every little thing, but you have to make your own decisions. And one of the issues that has come up is many people have been saying that they feel that they're used to being told what to do all the time, and so they want to continue to do that. But maybe that's not what you want to do. Maybe you need to really start making your own decisions, because one of the things you need to be very aware of is if you ask somebody to make your decisions for you, you're giving away your power. And if you give away your power, that means that you don't want to be responsible for yourself, and you don't want to grow up, you don't want to be an adult. And in an institutional setting, either you are in charge of a bunch of people, or you have somebody in charge over you, and then you turn over your power to them. And so this is something that we need to think about. Do we want to continue to do that? Normally in normal life, people start off as children and they grow up, and then they go to school, and then they go to university, and then maybe they get married and they have their own families and they develop their careers and all of this. And in Gyan, everyone is celibate, so on the whole, no families are created. A lot of people are connected with centers. And so the setup of a center is, you give your information, somebody tells you, you do this, you do that, don't do this, don't do that. There are lots of rules and regulations. And so it's very much set up as an institution. And so you have to decide what is next, because the interesting thing about COVID-19 is mostly people are not going to centers, mostly. And mostly people are listening to the Murli online, reading it. It's been accessible for many years. And some people are connecting with Madhuban for the Murli. Some people are connecting with this center or that center, because every center is doing the Murli on Zoom. Then there are tons and tons of events going on, which are all sent out to whoever's in your connection and then resent to others. And so the system of being limited to your particular center or your particular region, that is really not happening anymore. So the circumstances that we are in have created quite a lot of change, which is really very good, because then you can decide how you're going to do this. And some people will decide one way, some people will decide another way. we can't really say that one way is good and another way is not good. It's just that we need to deal with the realities of getting deinstitutionalized. You know, for quite some time, the yagya has been in a way divided into administrative aspects and spiritual aspects. And nowadays, the administrative aspects are called organization, and the spiritual aspects are called yagya. And then some people mix those two up and interpret them in various different ways. And so when you are not necessarily involved in a center in the way that you used to be, then it means that the function and purpose of the center and the people who are looking after centers, they have to think about that. Do we really need many, many centers? Because very small centers have been closing. Very few people have started to become Brahmins. Mostly it's old people who are Brahmins, and the new people, they go to various different events that we have, even if it's an online event. But I think that the outreach to new people is not happening in the same way at all. And so all of these things have created such a situation where Baba drama are forcing us to become adult and to get mature. I know there are a lot of people who are trying to work through their psychological issues, and some people are doing it using professional psychotherapists. Some people are just reading up on stuff and doing it their own way. Some people are doing the dialogue system with groups, which is quite a good system. Some people are doing 12-step programs because there is quite an awareness that if you want to be spiritually mature, you have to be psychologically sound as well. And a lot of people came to Gyan because of dealing with trauma and psychological issues, which meant that they could not really integrate in the regular world. They had a lot of issues, and it's very natural that when Brahma Kumaris offer peace of mind and love and family, that you will say, oh yeah, I could do with some of that. And so many people come for this, but now I think that we need to shift from this to really looking at the study, what the study is, and not study it like you would in a school where you are young and you listen to what the teacher says and you repeat it. That kind of education is now kind of long gone. And yet we are, I think, very interested in study, but we need to interpret the study in an adult way. So I think that there are a lot of people who are thinking about how do we shift from being young school children, school students, young university students, and come to people who are more like continuing education, adult students, because so many of us have been in Gyan so long and quite mature in age, but we need to be really integrated into the society. And one thought I have had is the idea of us operating rather like a virus. Of course, nobody likes viruses, especially not coronaviruses, but corona means a crown. And a Raj Yogi is also somebody with a crown. And what is the crown that we carry? We have our crown of sense of responsibility. We have our crown of being in our personal power and enjoying the powers through yoga. We have a crown because we are learning how to create a kingdom. We have been doing service, so we have served many people. That gives you a crown as a leader in the political sense. You have the crown of light because of being pure and yogis. So we are corona people in that way. And what does the coronavirus do? Anyone it comes in contact with, it will jump into them and start getting active in their system and taking it over. But if you think of ourselves as, these crowned beings of light who are moving around in the world, I think being not in an institution, you don't need to be in a uniform. And these days in the world, uniform is actually in many places by law limited to the military and police, and nobody else is allowed to wear a uniform. And because we have a lot of issues, terrorist activity, vigilante groups, and so on and so forth, the uniforms are not looked upon in a very favorable way. But what people like is someone who is really integrated and part of. But people also are interested in leadership. They're interested in people who will be mentors and guides, and someone who they can trust, someone who they can look to as an example that how do you deal with this very uncertain world that we are in. And so if we are not mature, if we are still operating as children and looking for somebody to tell us what to do, how are we going to be able to inspire and be a beneficial influence in the world? That is not going to happen. And so it's very important for us to say, okay, we have been in our school for a very long time and we have learned something extraordinary. But what we need to do now is to bring it to a level of maturity so that we are really in our power. We are really what Baba spoke of as the authority of experience. We have to be authorities. We are authorities. He has given us authority. We know what Shrimat is. We have practiced it for a long, long time. And we also have to apply it judiciously in current circumstances. And circumstances keep changing, but the words that we study don't change. And also, I think all of us are dealing with issues of translation, because whenever something is translated from one language into another, it's always an interpretation. And translations, choice of word, are influenced by the mentality of the translator. So if the translator is institutional type of person and thinks of everyone as little children, they will use that kind of language. And so we need to really think about all those things and work together to raise our level of consciousness individually and collectively. We have to make decisions. We have to decide how we use our time, resources, energy, and so on. Because now the world is in a very unstable state. There's a lot of distress. There are a lot of things that are not able to be managed by institutions. Hospitals are having a hard time. Education system is having a hard time. It's not working because so many schools are closed. Children are, well, some psychologists that I know are talking about how much the adults are making the children afraid. And so that you're going to get a whole generation of people who grew up with the coronavirus restrictions and lockdown and all of the information that is there all over the media, which is putting people into a state of anxiety, which they wouldn't otherwise be in. So we have to look at that, you know, what is our relationship with all the information that's coming? What is our relationship with the coronavirus and the rules and regulations, and how are we handling it? And are we participating in creating a situation where people are getting over anxious? Because that is not healthy. That's not psychologically or spiritually healthy. So we have to think about that. We also need to think about responsibilities. What is my responsibility? Where does my responsibility begin and end? Because we cannot have a sort of unlimited responsibility or sense of responsibility. We are not responsible for everyone's happiness. We are not responsible for how somebody feels. Even if you take this word, don't give sorrow, it's very subjective. What is giving sorrow? To my mind, I think we need to say, do not do harm, which also happens to be part of the Hippocratic oaths. The medical doctors must take this oath that they will not do harm. Giving sorrow, anybody can say, oh, this person gave me sorrow, which they, but they didn't do any harm. So I think that some of these expressions, how they are interpreted, how they are translated, has put us into a situation where we have gotten away from being realistic. And this is another area where sort of religious interpretation of something gets you to be a bit fanatical. Some people do become like that, some people don't. And of course, it's very individual. But there are many things like this that people are facing, especially people who have been in it for a very, very long time, who came into this when they were very young and when everything of the old world was considered really bad. And you have to follow what the elders say because that only is good, and you cannot trust your own decision making because that would be manmat, you know, and manmat is translated as dictates of your own mind, but in reality, when Dadi Janki talked to us about exactly what is Shrimat, Manmat, and Parmat, it was nothing like that at all. But the translators carried on with their expressions. And what we have as Shrimat is, of course, the ideology that Baba gives us about what a soul is, what God is, what drama is, and so on. Shrimat is ideology. It is a set of concepts. And Parmat is the ideology of the conventional society. So that will include conventional morality. It will include the prevailing interpretation of the dominant religion and the way that they the society's leaders want people to function in the society. All that is Paramat. And then Manmat is your internalization of Parma. It's nothing to do with dictates of your own mind at all. But when you have internalized the prevailing social attitudes, the religious concepts, and so on, you find yourself in opposition with Shrimat, and then people will say that's your own dictates, but all these words really need to be thought about. Do we want to use this kind of language? Because if we do use this kind of language, then what does it make people think? How does it make people use their minds and process ideas and make decisions? So all of that actually leads to this infantilization and keeps people in a mentality that corresponds with an institutionalized way of living. And I think what Baba is saying here to us indirectly is that, okay, now, the exams are here and you need to be fully in your power, you need to be adult, and you need to function in a way that is good kind of natural leadership in whatever society that you find yourself in. So I will stop there because I'm sure what I have said may have raised a few questions, and people may need to think about, okay, well, in that case, how do I position myself? What do I do with being different? Do I want to be the same as ever? Do I want to be different? Am I still a Brahmin? What is a Brahmin? All these questions definitely are coming up, and it's very important to talk about them so that we are shifting to the next level in a really good way. So before we start discussing it, let us pause for some meditation. So let yourself turn deep within. And really feel yourself, the soul. I am genderless, independent of culture, religion, nationality, race. I'm a pure being of light, a human spirit. And I have an eternal connection with God, the Supreme Being. Looking at my identity, my role, my participation in the world. I have meditated for long years. I have studied for long years. And I have been relatively disconnected from the mainstream of the world while doing this. soul and body have been purified to a good extent. I am connected to a vast network of good quality souls. I am coming into my mature years. And I carry a divine spiritual legacy that must be shared in a new way. I have developed power in the mind and heart. And now I serve more and more through the mind, through my being, my aura, my vibration and attitude. My presence. Now times are different. It is time for me to be in my power and be the conduit for God the Supreme. So be it. Om Shanti.